Hello, everybody. Namaste. I really wish I could be with you guys in person. Um, my daughter had a little health issue last night. I'm assuming people hear me and stuff like that. Layla, I see you. Can you give a thumbs up if everybody hears me right now? No? Can, yeah? Okay, we're good. So yeah, not to be overly graphic, well, I'll use fancy yoga terminology, but my daughter had upward moving energy. Uddiyana Vayu is what we call it in yoga. So it means she was up vomiting last night. So we had a little bit of a evening, and I'm relatively rested, but I really like to be in people, not so much with people, not so much on computers, but also this is the great thing about this age, we can carry on with things on the computer. So I I don't know how long ago, like a month or so, I got a email from Della. And the night before I was laying on the couch, I was laying down and I had this like flash of a topic of a talk I wanted to do. And it came in like really like a download, like it was like all the files expanded. And then I got the email from her the next morning. And when I saw the files come through, I was like, oh, I'll do that talk at the Interfaith next time I go there. And so then it was funny because as I went back and I looked at my topic, I was like, oh, this is like kind of a little bit obscure, a little, it could be a little bit confusing. So our personal mystical experiences and theological narratives in light of infinite realities and infinite paths. So as I got into that, I just thought that made me think of Homer a little bit. Seemed like a good topic in the moment, and we're gonna jump into it here. So even though it's a little bit wordy, there's a well-known story in the Indian traditions. It's in Jainism and Hinduism, various other paths, and I'm actually gonna read. Well, I'll tell the story because of my screen. I'd have to move too many things. It's called the parable of the blind men and the elephant. And different blind men approach an elephant and they're asked to explain what they feel when they go to the elephant. So one person touches the husk and they say, oh, this thing is long and sharp and hard. And then the other person goes to the leg and says it's like a tree trunk. It's wide and strong. Another person says it feels like a wall as they touch it. And the other person says it feels like a rope. And they all explain it in different ways. And then there was someone, excuse me, observing all of these blind people touching the elephant and said, actually, you're all just having your own unique experience from where you're touching the elephant. And the elephant actually contains all of these different parts. So I just wanted to tell this story in a little bit as we explore mystical experiences. So I'd like to make the assumption that on some level, everyone in the room here has had some sort of mystical experience. If you consider synchronicities, just like simple synchronicities can be attributed to a mystical experience by some of us. I've got all these things kind of bullet pointed out. I'm not going to go into all the topics. I just wanted to like give like a splattering of different types of experiences people have, mystical experiences. So samadhi and yoga and Vedanta, there's lots of classifications about what samadhi is. It's absorption into a single point of awareness, but it can take lots of different forms. But it's basically bliss states, absorption. Yeah, we won't go all into all the kinds of samadhi at the moment. We hear about people who talk about traveling astral planes. I grew up in the Swedenborgian church, Emanuel Swedenborg. I'm sure at least a few of you have heard of Emanuel Swedenborg. He spent a lot of time in astral realms and wrote about his experiences there. Some people, see auras. It's another sort of mystical experience. Deep joy, ecstatic devotion. And then we hear about things like Kundalini awakening and then pranic awakening, like when you feel energy move through your body, like really powerfully in different ways. So the peace, I've got this quote here, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So it's just this simple experience of peace and contentment could be considered a mystical experience by some of us. A holy instant. The Course in Miracles talks about that. Some people have experiences of angels, demons, communication with disembodied spirits, passed away ones, near-death experience, clairvoyance, clairaudience. It kind of goes on and on and on. I wouldn't be able to like list all of the kinds of mystical experiences. I put unity consciousness there, which is a very important one, where we lose track of our sense of individuality and feel that we are one with the all, part of the all. And that unity experience even happens differently for different people. And then one thing that last, I have a line there, but sometimes people, I've heard numerous people that I know and different people talk about, they get into a deep state of focus. Like they might be working on a math problem or something like that, and they have a mystical breakthrough accidentally. So I was interested in the Eckhart Tolle reading from this morning. Some would say he accidentally entered into yogic inquiry. What's the relationship with my sense of I? And he had a breakthrough with that. So people intentionally do those practices and have all sorts of mystical experiences as a byproduct of self-inquiry. So I just wanted to splatter out some of these like quick run through of mystical experiences because they're common and there's a large variety of them. Now, the thing that gets interesting here is you can have a mystical experience, but then we have all these people who then frame them. So that's where organized religion comes in, and theology, philosophy, different teachers, everybody's framing these things into the verbal cognitive mind. And this is where we tend to often get into a little bit of trickiness because it starts to be the realm of ideas versus the realm of experience. So, some of these topics like, is there heaven and hell? Some people will declare that there is or there is not. I wrote it, there is life after death or heaven and hell, because some people will say based upon someone's mystical experience or their personal mystical experience that there definitively is like a hell or a heaven. Some people will say that. Reincarnation, some people will make that statement. They'll like go for it. And within Hinduism, we have the Atman, the soul, and in Buddhism, we have Anatman, there's no soul. So these are two different framings or theological narratives, going back to my title, theological narratives about what is the nature of reality. And these things appear to disagree. And then another one, the last two, and I'm going to focus on these points a little bit, the world being real or the world being unreal. Now, I don't know who's there today, but I know on Facebook conversations, I've discussed with a few people and in chat, and then in person with a number of people, I've talked about this topic, the experience of the world being real or unreal. And so I wanted to jump into that specific idea a little bit more. So yeah, different faith traditions take different stances on these topics, and the world being real or unreal is one of them. So we're going to look at the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna to start, and then we're going to do an overview of a bunch of different world religion traditions because people say different things. So the reason I'm starting with Sri Ramakrishna is some people feel that Sri Ramakrishna was his personal spiritual experience unleashed the interfaith consciousness for the planet. So he would not say that the world is real or unreal. He would say that both of these things are fruits of spiritual practice. So some people will do spiritual practice that will lead them to think that the world is real, and other people will have spiritual practice and spiritual experiences which lead them to think that the world is unreal. And it doesn't need to be that one is right or that the other is wrong. So with that, going to go into going way, way, way back before Jesus. This is like so old school. Oh no, wait, I forgot if he's before or after Jesus. I should know that, but cancel that. So, but Adi Shankaracharya, pretty sure pre-Jesus, goes way back. He has a saying. He's the teacher of Advaita Vedanta, classical non-dualism in the monastic branch. So he has a saying. It's Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. It translates as God or Brahman is real and the world is unreal. And this is a very key teaching in his worldview. The God is real and the world is unreal. We see this in a lot of other wisdom traditions as well. Buddhism, As I understand the Course in Miracles kind of points that direction a little bit, maybe not as hardcore as Adi Shankaracharya does. So that is his stance. And I would go as far as to assume that that is his stance based upon his own personal mystical experience. And I don't mean to put down or diminish Adi Shankaracharya as simply a blind man touching an elephant, but you know, we all, once we start to try to get into the realm of words and communication and expression, we all have, when we're using our sense organs, and our cognition to explain the ultimate truth of which humans can experience, it is subject to complications. So, but Adi Shankaracharya says the world is unreal. Lots of the yoga traditions follow back to Adi Shankaracharya, like Yogananda, Swami Kripalu, who else would be prominent teachers? Ramakrishna tradition is very influenced by him, but not directly connected. But yeah, very, very dominant in Indian philosophy and yoga. Shivananda, yes, Swami Shivananda. So, Swami Turiyananda, who was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, declared at the end of his life, Brahma Satya Jagat Satya. So we'll just pause there. Brahma Satya Jagat Satya. So this is different than what Adi Shankaracharya says. He's saying God is real. The world is also real. And then he continues, Sab Satya Satya Pran Pratishtita. Everything is real. The life force, cosmic energy is established in truth. So he's taking a different philosophical explanation of mystical experience than Shankaracharya by saying that the world is indeed real. Now some people say that that is what Ramakrishna taught, but Ramakrishna tried to make room for all views to coexist. So this is an interesting, I find it interesting, quote from Sri Ramakrishna, and I will do my best to read it. There's complications with my screen a little bit, but the Jnani, so the Jnani is a person who practices the yoga of self-inquiry, like we were talking about Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle accidentally was practicing, or spontaneously would be a better word, was spontaneously practicing Jnana Yoga. What is the nature of my sense of self? What is the nature of I? So one who's engaged, I'll just translate it. One who's engaged in self-inquiry on the nature of self, Jnani, gives up identification with worldly things, discriminating, or we could say discerning, not this, not this. So not this is neti neti in Sanskrit. I'm not my mind, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my ego identity, I'm not these sensations. So you reject it all in this practice. Only then can the person reach Brahman. It is like reaching the roof of a house by leaving the steps behind one by one. So you're walking up steps, and as you go up these steps, they each disappear behind you. They become like fictitious. They didn't even exist. So it's like reaching the roof of a house by leaving the steps behind one by one. But the Vijnani, who is more intimately acquainted with God, Brahman, realizes something more. He realizes that the steps are made of the same materials as the roof, bricks, lime, and brick dust. That which is realized as God through the eliminating process of not this, is then found to have become the universe and all of its living beings. So in this section here, he's talking about Adi Shankaracharya's process of jnanis, discerning that they are not this, they are not this. And Sri Ramakrishna is saying that you can have this experience in different ways, where you go to the roof and everything disappears. But there's also an experience where you can go to the roof and then you see that the steps, the whole house, that all of it is actually made of the same stuff. It's a unity experience instead of like an emptiness experience. So continuing on this quote, the Vijnani sees that the reality, which is impersonal, is also personal, saguna. So nirguna and saguna are terms in yoga and Vedanta, with form and without form. So the Vijnani sees that reality, which is impersonal, is also personal. So this would also be God with form or God without form. So like Jesus is God versus formless space is God. So he continues, going back to the roof analogy, a person cannot live on the roof for a long time. The person comes down again. So you have this experience of everything being God, and then you come back off the roof. Those who realize Brahman in samadhi come down and also find that it is Brahma that has become the universe and its living beings. This is known as Vijnana. Got a couple little typos in there, but he's saying that the state of Vijnana is when you see that the illusion or all of the material is the same divine stuff as the formless absolute space. So he's defining these two different kinds of mystical experiences. Now, these are pretty, I'd say, top shelf mystical experiences. Synchronicity or feeling peace, those are much more accessible. Feeling that, like, really truly experiencing like infinity spreading out, it's not as common, although it does happen to some of us at times. So is what we can see here in this kind of long paragraph we just explored is Sri Ramakrishna's teaching is as many doctrines, so many paths. So he's not rejecting one doctrine over the other. He's saying that, you know, you can have this experience where the world doesn't exist, which is a valid spiritual experience, but you can also have the valid spiritual experience that the world does exist as something that is inherently divine. So we take on these paths and we go on these paths, and they're unfolding things for us, but they have different spiritual fruits. And different people on the different paths will have different spiritual fruits as well. So I'm exploring this. Well, we'll just keep going. So, well, what do the other major world religions say about the world being real or unreal? So in Buddhism, now just got to say, I copied this right off of the internet. This is not my words. According to Buddhist philosophy, the world as we perceive it is considered unreal in the sense that it is impermanent, constantly changing, and lacks inherent self, but it is still a real experience that we interact with. The true reality in Buddhism lies in the concept of emptiness, shunyata, which refers to the absence of a fixed self or essence in all phenomena. So that's a little, you know, heady, but basically Buddhism thinks the world is unreal, but the world has a transformational quality, which is kind of like walking up the steps, like Sri Ramakrishna was explaining for the jnani. So Adi Shankaracharya and Buddhism are very, very similar. There's some people say that Adi Shankaracharya was basically a thief of Buddhism. So Catholicism, according to Catholicism, the world is considered to be real. So taking a different stance here, the Catholic Church believes that the physical world is a genuine creation of God and therefore a part of true reality, not an illusion or an unreal construct. So now some people would think, oh, you know, none of the Hindus would say that, or none of the Eastern religions would say that, but that is incorrect. And we will get more into that. We talked on how Sri Ramakrishna was trying to harmonize these competing views, which we find in Hinduism. So Islam, in Islam, the physical world is considered real, but temporary. It is a manifestation of God's creation and serves as a test for humans during their earthly life, with the true and ultimate reality being the afterlife, where the true nature of existence is revealed. So again, in Islam, now I just have to stop here and say, you know, all of these Christianity or Islam's a big category, and I'm sure that within different Islamic schools of thinking, like Sufis probably say different things than like Sunnis. I don't know all of the Islamic schools, but I'm sure that there's debate on this topic and what it all means. Sikhism. So Sikhism is a little bit more complex in its view as well. So in Sikhism, now this was not written, but I wrote this, but in Sikhism, comments on the world being real or unreal are mixed. So you find both views. So the world's considered a real creation of God, and also has a tangible existence, but our perception of the world is often called an illusion or Maya. So we'll see a lot of this as we look into all the different, and this is only a 20-minute talk, but if we looked into all the different branches, there's often this thing of like, well, the world's kind of real, but not really real. And then other people are like, it's absolutely real. It's like pure God. It's non-different than God. Like you can't remove God from the world. So, and then people will be like, it's completely an illusion. It's a complete fabrication. It doesn't exist at all. So there's various views here on the topic. So Guru Angad, who's one of the Sikh gurus, says, the world is a daub of the true world. The Lord himself resides in it. So he's if we were to read too much into this quote, which I will, he's saying God is in matter. The Lord himself resides in the world. So God is in the physical stuff, quite literally. Guru Nanak, the first Sikh guru, says, true are thy regions and true thy universes, true thy worlds and true thy creation. So from this Guru Nanak quote, we could assume Guru Nanak is saying that the world has a divine quality as well. So one of the later Sikh gurus, Guru Tegh Bahadur, says, whatever we see is subject to vanishing like the shadow of a cloud. O slave Nanak, he who knows the world to be unreal lives under God's protection. So here he's bringing up more of like a classical Advaita, non-dualistic stance, which is the world's, because it's changing, it doesn't have a real permanent structure. And once we understand that, we have divine protection. And Guru Tegh Bahadur continues, the world is false like a mirage to the deer. Even after beholding the delusion, the mortal runs after it. So I find that pretty funny because I'm sure that there's a number of us in this room. I'm here in the room with you guys, I guess. We've had a lot of us have probably had spiritual experiences where we see the falseness of our perception and the falseness of the world. But sometimes even after having some spiritual experiences, we're still chasing after things, It's only when we get further away when we actually quit the chase, That's rarer things for humans. So Hinduism and Tantra. Let's see how much time I have here. Just a few minutes. I'm going to try to go over this really briefly, but we're just going to focus on a few schools. I just put Tantra up there to remind me. So many of you have heard of Kashmir Shaivism. Swami Muktananda has had centers and was in Ann Arbor at some point. So they believe that the world is real, right? Which with the Kashmir Shaivism, that is their stance that the world, Maya or Shakti, is non-different than God, which is similar to what Sri Ramakrishna teaches as well. Now, when we get into the Vaishnava schools, so these are three of the major teachers of the Vaishnava school, and I'll just go over this briefly. The one in the middle relates to the Hare Krishna movement, which we're all familiar with. He's dancing like our Hare Krishna friends like to dance. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Madhavacharya, he considers Maya, the world and Maya are the same thing. He considers it real in the sense that it's a phenomenal reality, but ultimately not true. So, they're parsing things apart here. It's real in the sense that it's a reality, but it's ultimately not the true reality. So then it gets into a lot of theological stuff, which is why I have Homer after all of these slides here. It's not to give away my joke. But and then Ramanjucharya, Maya is considered to be partially real. So he's kind of teasing this thing apart because in Vedanta, so all of these are Vedantic schools, they all believe that God is one in Hinduism. It's the core teaching in Hindu philosophy and Vedantic philosophy. And so if you're going to try to talk about God, like creation is one, you have to somehow justify the separation of God and the world. Like, how can you say that they're separate and say that everything's one? So they have to do a lot of like surgery. They're doing delicate surgery on these words to try to create theological arguments. Now, so it's a little overwhelming. What's that have to do with me in the present moment and my own life, right? Unless you're into studying this stuff. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considers Maya is considered to to not be entirely real, but an illusion that obscures the true reality of the divine. So the world is considered the power of God. So it's part of God. It's God's power, but it has an illusionary aspect to it. So again, all of these different statements, these are big theological statements that if we don't dig into them in depth, we're just left going, oh. But the main point is there's no cohesive one single stance amongst these different Vedanta and Tantra schools. Tantra tends to think that the world is real, hence the worship of the goddess and the worship of Shakti. Shakti is the manifest creation, is God herself, and we love her. So Vallabhacharya, who is another one of the Vedantic teachers, Maya, or the world, is considered not entirely unreal. So it's partially real. So he's kind of like splitting it apart again. But he believes that, again, he takes more of like a stance you'd find in Tantra or Shaktism, that the dynamic power, Shakti, of God are interconnected and one and can't be totally removed, but there's illusion within the world. So this is like, just like a quick overview of all these ideas. So I just wanted to stop here and say, you know, a lot of us, we get involved in paths, right? So you become a Buddhist or you have some sort of practicing Islam or whatever, and we start to take on these ideas, right? I start to believe whatever thing I'm into believes, right? But is it my direct experience, right? So like if I say that the world is real or unreal, how can I prove it? Is there any hard scientific evidence for it? Is there any theological, philosophical debate for it? And does it matter? It only matters to people who find this stuff interesting. And my opinion is that we focus on cultivating deeper spiritual experience. And if we like to study about these things, we can, but it's not an essential for spiritual growth. But if we accidentally take on an idea, such as the world being real or unreal, we might have a whole list of assumptions that come on with that. One of the issues comes when we say the world is unreal. Sometimes then people disassociate from responsibility in the world, which is a big problem, right? Or we can become like lack of compassion. Or if we think that the world is real, we could become too attached to things. We could cling to things if we think that the world is real. So there's a little bit of problem that can come if we adapt either of these ideas. So there's a quote here that I like a lot from Hanuman. Hanuman is from the Ramayana, the story of Sita and Ram. This is a picture of him jumping from India to Sri Lanka, when he went to go fight the bad guy. When I identify, the pictures over things here, when I identify with the body, I am your servant. When I identify with the individual soul, I am a portion of you, or I'm partially connected to God. This is him talking to Ram. And when I identify with the Supreme Atman, I am you. This is my firm conviction. So this teaching here often gets split into different ways, and it sums up a lot of the different Vedantic schools. Because some of them say, you know, we are separate from God. Like we can never come, our individual self can never be there. So when we do that, we see ourselves as a servant of God, which is a beautiful path to see ourselves as servants to God. When I see myself as an individual soul, when I identify with then I can see my individual souls connected to the Supreme, and that the Supreme and the individual soul are connected, but I still think that I am a soul. And then on the third, we could say level, for lack of better terms, when I identify with the Supreme, like I've lost sense of the ability to be someone serving God. I've lost track of the individual soul, and I feel that I'm one with everything. Then I feel that I'm non-different than the Supreme. So these things are all different ways. This is just a fun quote, jumping into it here. But so I put James Brown here to remind me in my talk, like, why are we even talking about this? So James Brown's going to take it to the top. Ding, 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 ding. So the problem that comes up is judgmentalness and mystical experiences. So whose mystical experience is better? You know, like some people will really get into, you have to cultivate samadhis. It's like, oh, well, I see the astral plane and all these other people don't see the astral plane. I've had Kundalini experiences and other people don't have Kundalini experiences, or it's more important to have Kundalini experiences. It's more important to see astral plane. So when we get into like unity consciousness, I've seen some people that are like, well, if you still have a sense of I, you're really not doing it quite right. But they could be having Kundalini experiences, but there's still a sense of I there. So there's this subtle judgmentalness that can come in spiritual, even against amongst open-minded, thoughtful, spiritual practitioners, spiritual seekers. So how do we get beyond feeling that others are lesser than us, and not judging other people's paths? And, we see it in Christianity. Jesus is the only one true way, right? And like we are the chosen ones and other ones are not, or our God is the best God. And this level of thinking is not too different than if it's not unity consciousness, it's not the real deal, right? Like if you don't experience oneness, you guys don't you believe in Jesus, that's not quite right. It's still this like a thing that creeps in. If you're not free from the sense of I, it's a lower form of spiritual experience. You believe in a dualistic God, you guys are beneath us. So, or if you think the world is real, or if you think the world is unreal, you're kind of taking these sides in these things. So my point here is it's very easy to be the blind man thinking that our perspective on the elephant is the one true way, right? So we get very annoyed with people who think they have the one true way, but how often do we think we have the one true way? So my suggestion is that only love and curiosity can really free us from our own closed-mindedness. So some people say Jesus and Buddha and Krishna don't disagree. It's just their followers that do. so with that, I've got this closing thoughts from Sri Ramakrishna. Going back to this statement, as many doctrines, so many paths. So when we get into, and I'll be willing to make the assumption here that most of the people at the Interfaith Center, and myself included, we tend to be drawn into we're less drawn to God in a form or heaven and hell, those kinds of spiritual framings. We tend to be more into infinite consciousness, universal love, right? So I think Ramakrishna actually calls for unifying those two camps, you could say, in a very beautiful way in this quote. So, Satchitananda, God's qualities, are like an infinite ocean. So Satchitananda means truth, consciousness, and bliss. It's a way in non-duality they explain God. So Satchitananda, God's qualities, is like an infinite ocean. Intense cold freezes water. Oops. I thought I was tricky. I'm almost done here. Sure, I've gone over time. So intense cold freezes the water into ice, which floats on the ocean and blocks of various forms. Likewise, through the cooling influence of bhakti, or love of God with form, one sees forms of God in the ocean of the absolute. These forms are meant for the bhaktas, the lovers of God. But when the sun of knowledge rises, the ice melts. It becomes the same water it was before, water above and water below. Everywhere, nothing but water. So if you go this far in the quote, you think that Sri Ramakrishna is saying that everything ultimately goes into the state of oneness, right? So there's the infinite ocean, there's ice forms, and you could say there's like a Jesus ice form pops up, or like a Krishna ice form pops up, or like a Krishna heaven. Like the Hare Krishnas, they believe in a Krishna heaven very similar to the Christianity, or a Christian heaven. These things take form in the infinite ocean, but then they melt all back into the water. But closing the quote, Sri Ramakrishna says, but you may say that for certain devotees, God assumes eternal forms. There are places in the ocean where the ice doesn't melt at all. So he's saying that, yes, there is this infinite oneness, but also that is all water, but that water would take a form and it could hold that form eternally And he's using this to try to unify the idea between people who worship God with form or people who believe in the formless. A little different topic than the world being real or unreal, but it's also this thing of how do we bring these conflicting ideas together so that they can truly be tolerant and supportive of each other and not at odds with each other, or sort of like the world needs to be real, the world needs to be unreal, or God has form, God doesn't have form. We can harmonize these things. And the teachings of Ramakrishna show us beautiful ways how to do those. And with that, I conclude my talk. Thank you all for listening, and I wish I could see you and smell you and all things.